Welcome to Fearless Females, where ambition meets resilience. Meet your guide, Lorie Jones, owner of Fearless Financial Advisors. Join her and remarkable women executives as they uncover the triumphs and transformative moments shaping extraordinary careers. Ready to be fearless? Let the journey begin.
Good morning, and thank you so much for joining us today. Again, on Fearless Females. You guys, I am just so excited about this next guest. It's Dr. Sheila Gujrathi, and I practiced saying her name 3 times, so I hope I got it right again. But she is just amazing. She's a doctor, she's biochemistry, pharma, and she is all about empowering women. And we had so much in common as far as wanting women's voices to be heard and wanting them to put themselves out there as authentic and stay in these spaces, in these, medical spaces, in these finance spaces, and any space that we want to be in, and knowing that we can really make a difference in this space. I know that this episode is a little bit longer than usual, but I really, really think that you're going to get so much from listening to her. She just is. She's so empowering, and she is so, so smart. And I found every question that I asked her, I found a little nugget and an answer in for something that I was doing or something that I was thinking about doing. But I think the thing that meant the most to me was just her views about being authentic. And even at a young age, being who you are rather than trying to turn into what everyone else says you should be, what you should be doing or who you should be showing up as. So if this episode resonates with you and you think it might resonate with someone else that you know, just send them a link. Just follow the podcast and send them a little link to this show, because I think that what Sheila has to say is just amazing. And I don't think you can go wrong with sharing it with some of these amazing women in your own lives. Thank you. Let's get started. So I'm so excited today. We are here to chat with Dr. Sheila Gujrathi. She is in biotech and pharma, and she's got a really interesting story that I just know you're going to love. So I'm so excited. Thank you so much for joining us today, Sheila.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm thrilled to be here.
So my first question is always, it's either the easiest question or the hardest question. It's, what is your favorite book? Tell me.
Well, I have a very strong spiritual practice. Mm-hmm. And a long-standing background reading a number of amazing spiritually oriented books. So I like to recommend The Untethered Soul by Michael Singer, because I think it's just so beautifully written and it's so clear for those who are interested in learning more about, what a spiritual journey could look like, or what does that meant for me. I studied Hindu philosophy and Vedanta all my life, but those texts can be quite dense. So I think, Michael really does an amazing job at getting at kind of some of the similar principles and way of life that I pursue and my values. So I highly recommend that book.
I think I've heard that suggestion before, so I probably better move that up to closer to the higher of my stack of books. But it sounds really interesting. It sounds like kind of an introspective or a thinking sort of book.
It really is. And then just other books along the same genre, Eckhart Tolle's books, The Power of Now and A New Earth. Again, just really wonderful kind of introductory texts to a spiritual way of life. And again, highly recommend any of those, just for those who are interested in exploring or who have real interest in this area. They're just so well written.
That's great. I actually use this as my book list. I use it as like what I should be reading, and I'll go through after a podcast, and I'll order everything that they've recommended in the last like 3 or 4 podcasts. So I never have to read books I don't enjoy, because these are always really great suggestions. So thank you. I appreciate that.
That's a great way to get recommendations. Wonderful.
I know. It's so sneaky of me, huh? So tell me a little bit about your journey. Tell me how you started out. Did you always know what you wanted to be? How did you end up where you were? Is it a straight path? Just let us know a little bit more about you.
Yeah, so I grew up on the East Coast in the U.S., and I'm a daughter of Indian immigrants. Both my parents came over in the 1960s, and they're both physicians and really excellent doctors. And so I grew up kind of surrounded by medicine my whole childhood and young adult life. So I was always very focused on becoming a physician and taking care of patients. I had watched my parents do that throughout, again, my childhood. And so that's really what I was going to do. Also, my brother became a doctor. So we were all kind of a family of physicians. And so I set out to do that. I was going to be a practicing clinician. I was going to do academic research, mostly on the translational side, kind of bringing new therapies to patients. And so I entered a 7-year medical program at Northwestern. So I was accepted into medical school from high school, and it was an accelerated honors program. And then I studied engineering undergrad and biomedical engineering to, give me some more scientific discipline. And then I pursued a residency in internal medicine at the Brigham Women's Hospital at Harvard, and then a fellowship in allergy, immunology, rheumatology at UCSF in Stanford. So I was all in. I spent the first 30 years of my life really training to be a great clinician and researcher, an academic researcher. And that was what I was going to do. And so, such a surprise to me that, as I was finishing my training, I decided to make a major pivot in my career and actually decided to leave medicine, the practice of medicine, and ended up going into biotech and pharmaceutical organizations, and really dedicated my life now to developing novel, innovative medicines through what we call that biotech industry. And so never thought that was going to happen, didn't have a plan, wasn't even aware that those were potential careers I could pursue and follow. But I'm so grateful that I did, because I really just love my career. I love working with such amazing people day in, day out. I still keep patients at the center of my thoughts and goals and decisions, and they're my North Star to help as many patients and their families as possible all around the globe. And my ability to have even a broader impact than a practicing clinician, day to day is very meaningful to me. I really admire physicians. I'm married to a physician who is an ER doc, who is like the pit. He's really a hero. And so he sees patients, day in, day out, and saves their lives. And so I really admire physicians who are on the front lines and taking care of patients every day. I just feel like I found the right career for me to really leverage the way I love to be innovative. I love to learn new things. And then I really do like to have this more global impact. And so that's really, I feel so blessed about my career.
Sheila, did you get kicked out of the family when you chose to not go? Like everyone is a doctor. Were they like, oh my goodness, are you kidding?
Well, there was a period of time, yes, where I almost got kicked out. And, I was told that I was making a huge mistake and throwing away such an investment I made in myself. But it was financial, it was time and energy and effort. Obviously, my family was very invested in me becoming a physician as well. It was very much tied to my identity and my familial identity. And it's also a very highly respected profession, and, the Indian kind of societal and cultural norms, as well as probably a lot of other groups that, do hold doctors in high regard. And so it was a lot to have the courage to step away from all of that and break free and give myself a chance to explore other career paths. And at that time, this was, 30 years ago, this just wasn't done. I mean, nobody left medicine to go pursue industry. It's more of a tried and true track now, I would say. Mm-hmm. But at that time, it was really considered the dark side, and something that really wasn't as respected or understood, I would say. So, yeah, I almost got kicked out, but thankfully, they stuck with me and have been very supportive, ever since.
Well, and the thing is like you're saying biotech and medical, and both of those sound like really smart, educated things to do. And biotech is kind of a, recently it's been in the news. It's super important and at the forefront of research and technology. So that's all I know about biotech. So what is it that you have a bigger impact on more people just because you're working in that area? But what do you do?
Yeah. So basically what I ended up doing, I actually spent some time at a consulting company called McKinsey and Company. And that was a really well-known strategic management consulting firm. And what that does is it actually takes mostly MBA, business graduate students, but also other graduate students. And for me, I came in as a fully formed physician. Mm-hmm. They take a bunch of really smart people and consultants, and we go in and we work with large and small companies on helping them solve pretty big, important problems that they are grappling with and wrestling with. And so through that experience, I got to work with a lot of large pharmaceutical companies. I got to work with their senior management and executive teams coming right out of my medical training. So it really shaped me to understand how impactful this industry is. And essentially, and then after that, I actually got a job on the commercial side to be in marketing, but quickly realized that I want to be on the R&D side. Mm-hmm. So I moved back into R&D, and I was the medical leader and development team leader on multiple programs. And basically what I have spent over the last, 2 to 3 decades doing is developing innovative therapies for patients with autoimmune diseases and cancer primarily, as well as neurologic diseases. So basically, and I'm so blessed that I studied immunology. So this has been like an incredible coming of age for immunology, the understanding of the body's immune system and how it can go awry and basically lead to diseases when you think about autoimmune diseases. Also, how it can be harnessed to become effective therapies. And that's what we're doing in the cancer setting. We're actually harnessing our body's own immune system to fight cancer. And then on the autoimmune side, for patients with multiple sclerosis and lupus and rheumatoid arthritis and inflammatory bowel disease, these are all considered to be autoimmune diseases. And what we're doing there is we're dampening the immune system of a patient whose immune system's gone awry and is actually attacking itself. And so based on my knowledge of immunology, I can kind of come forward with different therapies that either rev up immune systems to help fight cancer or dampen immune systems to really get diseases under remission and hopefully reset them so that patients don't have their immune system attacking themselves, so they don't have those autoimmune diseases. And it's just been this amazing experience because now we have so many novel therapies that can take care of patients with these different diseases, and they're used all over the world. And so I've been part of developing the clinical plans, the development plans, running those trials, getting those drugs approved, working with the FDA and the European medicine agencies to get these drugs approved and onto the market, but doing all the clinical trials, analyzing data. And now I've been working with, early stage researchers to come up with even novel technologies, things that are using AI and machine learning, using RNA and DNA and cell therapies, in addition to what we call the small molecules and large molecules. Small molecules you'll take by mouth or pills, and large molecules are usually injections or IV infusions. All of these drugs and therapies and modalities are important for patients. So we have to employ all of this to try to figure out how to cure patients of their diseases. And so that's what I've been doing for the last, 3 decades. And I've loved every minute of it.
Sheila, that is so cool. It's like you're making history or you're making dreams come true. Like you really are the forefront of trying to help these people rather than just one person, one patient at a time. You're trying to help, cure cancer or these autoimmune diseases. That's really cool.
Yes, when I was working at one of the companies that I kind of, was some of my early entry into biotech, it was an amazing company called Genentech in the San Francisco Bay Area, one of the first and largest biotech companies that were really developing these novel therapies. They were called biologics. And we were basically, coding how to have proteins expressed by these different cell lines and then use those proteins, purify them, and then use those proteins as medicines for patients. And we used to talk about how we want to rewrite the textbooks for how we take care of diseases. And that's basically what we set out to do. And that's what we ended up doing. And that's what we're going to continue to do within the biotech industry, all for really improving the lives of patients and their families.
And being one who sees the lives of those patients as they get cancer and that's the one that I probably have the most experience with. It's truly amazing what you guys are doing there to help maybe bring an end to this terrible thing. I keep saying I want to punch cancer in the face.
Yeah, we all do, right? All of us have been affected by this. Most of us have a loved one or ourselves who've experienced these types of terrible situations, and it's so distressing. And we just have to keep at it, and and just keep making differences. And we've been making differences, and so that's such a true North Star for me, and it's very meaningful.
Yeah. So, Sheila, tell me a little bit about across your journey. Is there any investment that you've made in yourself that you're like, oh my goodness, I'm just so glad I did that. My life wouldn't have turned out the same if I hadn't done that thing.
Well, it's been almost a continuous investment in myself. It's something that, so while I have absolutely loved my career and my journey, it hasn't always been easy. I was oftentimes the only woman in a room. I was oftentimes the only person of color in the room. I, sometimes didn't have anyone who looked like me that I was working with or acted like me or spoke like me. And so I never really felt like I quite fit in. This was true when I was in academic medicine, in terms of when you look at the walls of the grand rounds at these very prestigious universities and academic medical centers, there's not a lot of people who look like you. Like, actually, there's nobody that looks like you on the walls or who are chairing these departments. And you're really trying your best to fit in. And for me, it was trying to be that model minority and embrace other cultures and traditions, to feel like I belonged. And so, I spent my whole, career doing this, decade after decade, whether I was in medicine or whether that was in biotech, large pharmaceutical organizations, and then smaller biotech, working with different investors, and I think I just woke up one day, this is later in my career, and realized, wow, like haven't really been true to myself. And I think once you get into these higher echelons of leadership, it's even more important to be authentic, and because that's where you derive true power. And I started to realize that in order for me to be as effective as I can be, should be, and need to be in these senior leadership roles, I really needed to come back to myself.
Mm-hmm.
And so one of the biggest investments that I have made that I am so proud of is investing in myself and believing in myself and showing up as my authentic self when I knew maybe that didn't fit in, or maybe that was a little different than the norm of what I was experiencing around me, because then that's when I could be most effective. And I knew it was the best thing for the business, for the programs I was working on, and ultimately for patients, is for me to bring all of myself to work day in, day out. And so that's what I would say is the most important investment I've made is in myself and believing in myself.
I love that. I love the way you put that, because we do spend a whole lot of time trying to fit in rather than stand out. And being authentically you makes you unique. It makes you stand out. It makes you who you are. But how would you have done that earlier? Because you spent the first part of your journey and your career trying to fit in. And quite honestly, most of us do, don't we?
I think, just knowing that the best thing I could do is to be myself earlier on in my career, I think I would have just relaxed more. I think, when I look back, even through my academic studies and through my early training, I think I was just really stressed out all the time. And I see that in the younger generations. I have two teenagers, who have been going through, so much trying to figure out their career path, get into college, all of these aspects. And everyone's, again, trying to fit in, trying to check all the boxes, trying to do all the right things. And they're even told, they want to see differences in their applications, but it's so hard for them. And, and I think if I just really knew early on how much just being myself would be such a differentiator and driver of my success, I could have been just more relaxed and embracing myself more, as opposed to just being so stressed out that maybe I said the wrong thing, or, didn't wear the right thing, or, just all of these things that kind of occupy so much of our mind and energy.
Yeah. Oh, I love the way that you put that. And it is so true. Like if we could be comfortable with who we really authentically were earlier, maybe we wouldn't have to fight so hard during those years to get where we were, because we naturally maybe attract the people who were meant to come into our lives and into our sphere and the journey that we were meant to go on because we didn't spend so much time trying to act like everyone else, right?
Well, that's exactly the next point, which I'm so glad you brought that up, is that because then you really figure out like, who are your people and finding your people. So for example, if you're not fitting in and people don't want to embrace who you are or honor that, then that's really important information that you want to know as soon as possible, because you actually don't want to spend a lot of time building up those relationships that aren't going to honor your authentic self and support you and be a mirror for you. I talk a lot about that in my book, my TED Talk. You want to surround yourself with mirrors, people who see you, hear you, understand you, believe in you, have your back, want to support you. And, because you'll find people who don't want that. And then you'll find people who do. And you want to surround yourself with those people who do, because that's the way we want to live our lives. We want to bring all of us to the table. We want to have a seat at the table, and we want to bring all of us to the table, externally and internally, because that's, again, when we're going to live our thriving life. And believe me, you're doing your best work when you are yourself. Mm-hmm. And so, but through that journey, you're going to find your people, and then you're going to surround yourself with those folks. I talk about building your personal board of directors, but getting more clarity on who those people are early in your career is such a career accelerator. Not again, just for climbing up the corporate ladder, but for you to find what that personal journey is for yourself and what your vision is of what you can create in this lifetime. And so I think that all of those are like the amplifiers that you want to bring into your life, and it is all necessary. But starting with yourself and understanding and letting yourself be yourself is so critical. And also, it's ironically that like a huge amplifier for your success, because that's when you can build those trusting, authentic relationships. Mm-hmm. And we all know that relationships, really make business, stronger and help you thrive in the business world. You need to let your guard down and be vulnerable so that people can understand where you're coming from and trust you more. Yeah. And when you have all your guards up, it's very difficult to develop trusting relationships. And so if you're feeling threatened or not safe, like it's not a great place for you to be, because people aren't going to really know who you are, and then you're not going to be able to thrive and strive successfully in those environments.
Oh, that's just like, we could just drop my, right now. I agree. I think that is so important. And I love the way you phrase that. So Sheila, along your journey, did you ever get some really bad advice? What's the worst advice you've gotten? And did you take the advice or did you not?
Well, I think the worst advice I got was to fit in, was to kind of, play that game, or, realize that, this is what you have to do to fit in to get to that next promotion. I also was given advice, many times that I wasn't suitable for certain roles, that I wasn't the right person to be a leader in this organization, or be a therapeutic area head, or be a spokesperson for a company. And that, I should go do something else and not pursue my dream. And that was actually advice I got from, respected leaders who were mentoring me, in these organizations. And I didn't listen to that advice, actually.
Well, thank goodness. But why were they telling you this? You were so, go-getter and all that sort of stuff.
It was really shocking. And then I actually then started to, the really damaging part was when I started to believe that advice, like, oh, okay, well, I guess I'm not a good drug developer, or, maybe I'm not, set out to be an articulate communicator that can represent a company. And I just had no idea why that was, because I would look around me and I was making all these strategic presentations to senior leadership. They were calling me to lead these teams. So I started feeling like this is the whole gaslighting piece, where you start to feel a little crazy because you're playing some very senior roles. I had all the academic training. I had all the credentials. I absolutely knew how smart I was and capable and talented. And in fact, I was running around doing everyone else's job. And then at the same time, you being told that you're not going to be that external spokesperson, or you're going to, and then you weren't getting those promotions, even though you were playing those roles. Mm-hmm. You start to feel like you're going a little crazy, and then you start to internalize those, with that conditioning or those things that people are saying to you, and then they become your internal limiting thought patterns and
Yeah.
beliefs. So it's not that we wake up with all these limiting thought patterns and beliefs. There's a process that we go through, which is internal doubts. I call them the fear, insecurity, doubt, and shame, the FIDS, and the external environments that amplify those doubts or even create those internal doubts that we then internalize. So there's this interplay that's occurring for us internally and externally that, many women and people of color, people of underrepresented groups or marginalized communities are experiencing. And then that becomes our internal limiting glass ceiling. So there's an external glass ceiling and there's an internal glass ceiling, and we're experiencing that. And then that causes a lot of people to drop out and opt out. And that's what I think sometimes is occurring in these environments, because I see a lot of people leaning in, but they're hitting their head against the wall, and then they're kind of confused and flustered and don't know what's happening. And then they're miserable. And then they decide, well, I just don't want to operate like this anymore. And this is just not worth it. And then they opt out.
Which gets rid of a lot of talent. And, like maybe we've gotten rid of the person that could make the next big breakthrough in biotech or in finance in my position, like that pushes people out of the room that really should have a seat at the table and could really make a difference. So how do you interrupt that? Because I see that not just in your industry, but it happens everywhere. And you're right, minorities and women, a lot of times we're the ones who we hear those voices and then we just keep saying them in our head. Like, how do you interrupt that cycle? Do you know?
Yeah, well, this is what I wrote the book about, honestly. It was all about this because I had experienced this. This was my own personal journey. And then when I decided, when I realized what was going on, because it took me some time to even realize what was happening, because I just was like head down, trying to prove myself, fit in, keep getting promotions, do a great job, like keep trying to hit the ball out of the park, right? Like that was... because, and my husband used to say that you have to be twice as good to get half the credit. But it was something I just realized and said, okay, well, that's reality. That's what I have to keep doing. And it's like striving and fighting and struggling and doing all these things. And then I think one day I just hit a wall and I was like, I'm just like miserable. I'm miserable professionally. I'm miserable personally. And is this what life is about? And it didn't matter how many successes I had. I still felt like I was always behind the eight ball. I always felt like I had something to prove. And it's exhausting, it's exhausting living life like that. So I think when I just realized that, it wasn't just, again, the external environments I found myself in, it was how I was holding myself back because I was beating myself up all the time. I was so self-critical. I was, nothing was good enough. And I was caught in that prism of perfectionism. And I had so much of the fear, insecurity, doubt, and shame, the FIDS that I was living my life out of fear. And, I think that's true for a lot of really high achieving women and minorities and just people. Like this could be true for my male allies and peers and supporters too. Like many of us are, McKinsey used to look for these insecure overachievers, and, many of us fall into that kind of phenotype. But that's just not a way to live a happy, grounded life. And again, because I've had this really strong spiritual practice, I realized that from a young age that I didn't want to live a life like that, but then I found myself living that life. And so waking up to all of this truth and reality was so eye-opening. And I thought, well, what could I do about it? I first figured it out for myself, and then I wanted to write about it and help others avoid some of those mistakes and pitfalls I found myself in. So I wrote this book called The Mirror Effect, and it really has 3 parts. The first is holding up your own mirror and knowing thyself. Because doing that work to become free of the limiting thought patterns and beliefs is so critical for your own happiness and for you to be able to navigate your external environment successfully. The second part of the mirror is reflect on your surroundings and understand your environment so that you can navigate those difficult environments and you can find the right environments where you're going to thrive and not settle for anything less. Find those thriving environments for yourself. And the last part of the book is make a life worth mirroring, setting yourselves up and others for success. And I write all of this to create a playbook and, because there is no playbook, and I felt like I didn't have a playbook as I was navigating these environments. And to your point, it's pretty universal. It's not related to any one industry. It's like this global experience that many of us are having. And then we're thinking we're going through it all alone. Yeah. And I also want to tell people you're not alone. we're all in this together. And because when you think you're alone, that's when shame really kind of breeds and grows, when you're feeling so isolated. So I wrote this book, and I also created an accompanying workbook and journal to help people break free of these limiting thought patterns and beliefs and understanding how to navigate kind of these external environments they're finding themselves in.
I love that. I'm going to post the link to that in our show notes too for you.
Thank you so much. That's great. Yeah. And it's really meant to be for anyone who feels like, they resonate with these messages. And but it just takes some work, but it's really productive and, really satisfying work, because the goal of it is to find yourself and to connect more with your joy and happiness and really start to understand what it feels like to be compassionate towards yourself and how that is so liberating.
I love that idea too, of self-compassion, of not beating yourself up. In fact, I wrote a blog post or an article about that. Just like, what if you were nicer to yourself? So I love that.
What would that look like? What if you truly and deeply loved yourself?
Mm-hmm.
What would that mean for you? What decisions would you make every day?
Yeah,
how would you show up for yourself?
For your growth and where you end up. Yeah, that's great. So looking back along your journey, Sheila, is there a I have so many of these where I'm like, ooh, I would, knowing what I know now, like I would go back and do that differently the next time. Do you have anything like that, a do-over?
Yeah, no, I think it's some of the decisions I made in terms of people I chose to work with. If I knew what I knew now, I really would have not taken those roles and gone and maybe joined other roles and found other people to partner with. I remember I had a mentor who told me, when I was making a pretty big career decision, he said, always choose the people. And I thought I was doing that, and so I remember in that next role I chose the people and it worked out beautifully. I think you just have to kind of keep assessing whether those are the people you want to keep working with, or do you want to, find other people to work with. And it's kind of getting clarity on what your goals are, if people are going to be supportive of those goals, having those transparent conversations early on to make sure that there's alignment. And if they're not supporting you, then really make the decision to get out of there and go do something else. So I think really, and I really counsel people to do this. I say, get that clarity of what you're looking for in a particular role, for example, whatever you're interviewing for, but also the next set of roles, and be clear about what you like your career trajectory to be and to encompass. And if you're not thinking that that's an environment that's going to support your career growth, either through your manager or that leadership team, then maybe that's not a good environment for you to sign up to work in.
That's interesting, because starting out with 2 or 3 decisions or roles past what you're hiring for, that's to make sure that a lot of those companies don't have the options for you to grow in the way that you want to grow. And maybe reassessing right there at the beginning to say, I want, if we're going to keep me in this very boxy sort of role, like that's not where I want to be. So maybe I need to look elsewhere so that I have a little bit of room to expand and grow. That's so interesting. I never even thought of that.
Yes, exactly. And I want to be really cognizant that sometimes it's a difficult job market. I've been out, talking about my book and doing a lot of book launch events. And I talk to a lot of graduate students, and sometimes they don't have abundant choices, which I understand and I'm very respectful of. But at least go in then eyes wide open, right? Mm-hmm. So you say, okay, well, this is a great company for this type of role and a set of experiences. But then you won't be confused about that you're not going to get that promotion to that next level, that you're going to go in and get a set of experiences and you're going to stay there for that 2 to 3 years and work at some great company and get really valuable experiences. But then you're going to need to look elsewhere, for that next set of opportunities. And then you start networking around that early on. Mm-hmm. And make sure you always have choices. Okay. The person who's going to look out for you is you. Mm-hmm. You can't rely on other people. It's not their job to look out for you. The person who's going to need to look out for yourself is yourself. Have your own back. So go in eyes wide open and get clarity of like what a company will be able to help you with. And if it's that certain role, or they may say, we're so invested in your career growth. I mean, there are many companies that take career development very seriously, and they'll set you up with mentors and they'll set you up with sponsors. And they'll be thinking about you not only for that role you're playing, but where else can you go? And sometimes that may mean lateral moves before they step you up into that next level of promotion. But they're thinking about that and they're having these active conversations with you. And I've seen organizations do that incredibly well. So ideally, it'd be great for you to find an organization like that. But if you don't find that, that's okay. Just know that, you're going to have to do that for yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. I had one woman who I interviewed a long time ago, and she said, nobody cares about your career as much as you do. It doesn't happen. You are the one who cares about your career, your growth, your trajectory, your life more than anyone else. So take charge of that.
Yeah, and there's nothing wrong with that. That's actually reality and truth. And for us to think that someone's going to be looking out for us and take care of us, like that puts us into like that victim mentality. Like take responsibility for your own life, professionally and personally, and empower yourself. My messages are one of empowerment. What can we control? And how do we show up the best to take care of ourselves and the ones we love? That's the message. And there's so much we can do. You all have more power than you realize. I have more power than I ever realized. And I remember someone telling me that once, and I didn't believe them. They said, you're the one who has the power in the situation. I thought, oh no, not me. But it was absolutely me, because I was the brilliant person creating all the programs and doing all the work. So absolutely, you have the power to do that. And you can, you are highly talented, people that, need to be at these different companies. And, once you realize that, you can go a long way. You can get more powerful in your negotiations. I have a whole chapter about negotiations because it's really important to negotiate for yourself. And you can, take your talent and capabilities to the top companies and work with great people and find those people who are going to support you and promote you. And then, when people realize that, wow, I really need to develop people in order for them to want to work for me, that's when you're going to be making the biggest impact.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it also brings a lot of joy to your own life too, or at least it does in my case. Like as you develop and help others along their journey, that really, it grows you too.
It really does. It's a two-way street, and I love giving back now. And I love that I have the opportunity to give back and pay this forward. And I want to do that. And I think finding those mentors and sponsors, but then you being a mentor and sponsor for others, all of us can be a mirror for someone in our lives starting today. And again, and it gives, and I call it the gift that keeps on giving, and it creates so much richness in our lives, but it also pays back in all these intangible ways and sometimes tangible ways that you don't anticipate. Mm-hmm. So if you want to find great mentors and sponsors, be a mentor and sponsor for another.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Sheila, if you could go back and high five yourself for a really great past financial decision, what would it be?
Well, beyond investing in myself, because honestly, that has been the most lucrative investment I could have thought to make. I mean, I've been incredibly successful in my career. And so believing in myself and that I could do this has really been transformative. I think it's, I've created a lot of wealth for my family and myself and my loved ones. So it's really been amazing. So I think, beyond that, it's really around, when I look at investment opportunities, and again, I analyze them and I do that hard, analysis with all of my skill sets and experiences, is the companies I choose to work with and for, and investments and personally that I make, whether that's in the stock market or privately, many of them have really worked out quite well. So my financial advisors have like a separate fund for me that in terms of the investments I make, and that typically outperforms the stock market, very consistently. So I don't do this all the time, but when I do, it's something that I don't have like 100% track record by any means. I definitely have had a number of estimates I take a loss on, but overall, I'm very net positive, I would say.
Uh-huh. And that's like private investments where you're supporting different companies or things like that.
Yes, or even the public stock market. I'll go ahead and make some investments because I'll see a really undervalued company and I'll know the programs and I'll know the team and I'll say, that's just not right. And I'll just go ahead and make a big investment. Usually will pay out really well. So yeah, so I've been fortunate, but again, it comes back to believing in myself, believing in my abilities to basically understand what are favorable investments and then, investing in those things myself. I used to do all that for others, and I realized, well, I could do that for myself. And then I started, doing my own investments, and that's been incredibly, successful. So I encourage everyone, again, this is part of empowering yourself. If you are, if you can figure out good investment thesis for others, you can absolutely figure that out for yourself. And you may want to start out with smaller quantitative capital initially, things that you would be okay with losing. But if you can grow that and create your own investment fund, then you can continue to invest out of that. So I've basically done that for myself.
What scared you the most when you started out on your journey? And does it still scare you today?
Well, I think it's just that fear that, the fear of standing out, the fear of taking up space, because you hear in your head, who do you think you are? Because someone has told you that. Someone has told me that in my life, believe it or not. Someone has actually said, like, who do you think you are to step into this leadership role or actually do my job when I had that leadership role? It was like, well, I'm actually in this role doing my job. But, it can rub people the wrong way. So you have to, there's a lot of conscious and unconscious bias we face. And it's very unfortunate. I really do hope that for the next generations that they don't experience that. But I think, unfortunately, in the current geopolitical climate that we find ourselves, it seems that some of that behavior and some of that language seems acceptable, again. And I grew up with a lot of discrimination. So I kind of grew up in a time where, there was a lot of inappropriate commentary and things that I experienced as a young girl that stayed with me. Mm-hmm. And so, I think, breaking out of that, so I have a lot of that fear of being visible, taking up space. I remember when I even first started working on my social media platform, because I was told if I was going to do a TEDx talk, I needed to have a platform, to make, to help get that message out. You have an idea where it's spreading, but then you have to do the work of spreading the message. And so for the greater good of trying to help others, I started investing in this platform, not for myself. I'm a real introvert, and I actually don't enjoy any of that. Mm-hmm. And it's not very comfortable being so vulnerable, but I knew it was important to help others. And I remember, getting the feedback once I first started sharing stories or sharing my thinking and my lessons learned, the positive feedback I got. Thank you so much for sharing that. I had no idea that you had experienced this, because then they again know that they're not alone. Mm-hmm. And so I'm trying to do this to help others. And it's hard. It's hard to come up and face those fears. It's much easier for me to go do a scientific presentation than for me to be vulnerable and write, a vulnerable post.
Yeah.
That's a lot harder, actually.
Yeah, I hear you. I write quite a bit on my blog, but I have a really hard time sending it out. It's like putting my baby out and I'm like, well, they'll look at me. People will look at me. Like, that's what you're supposed to do. But I get it. I feel the same way. And you probably hear that a lot from the work you do it's really valuable and necessary that other people hear these ideas that you put forth, even if it's a little scary. You got to be fearless, right?
You do. And I just really ask people and encourage them, if there's something that anyone has put out, not even me, that resonates with you, let them know, because those pieces of feedback help them keep going. Mm-hmm. So just, any positive encouragement you have for those that are inspiring you, just engage with them, just because it gets, you say, okay, well, that's enough. I'll keep going, and then until you get the next, set of positive comments or direct DMs or, things like that, because it's that also can be a little bit lonely when you're kind of putting things out, into the world and not showing, how well it's being received. But anyway, if people can do that, it goes a long way. We're all in this together. Again, I keep saying that, but it's true. It's this ecosystem we're building. And if we can build one of positivity, of lifting each other up while we're climbing, of supporting one another, it's just like, that is something that we just need to bond together. Or I ask people to bond together so that we can, keep bringing good into this world. I want to be a platform of love and light. And that's really been my intention. And I feel so grateful that I had the opportunity to even do that, because of what I've, accomplished in my career and personally. And so I'm going to keep doing that, at least for the foreseeable future.
I love that. And I was reading a book not too long ago. It said if it takes less than 5 minutes to do something nice, like just do that thing. Like fill out the survey, send the little note, and doesn't make a difference if you think about it but don't do it. So if you think about it, yeah, just do it. If it takes 5 minutes or less, just do that thing.
It's amazing how these small little actions can make so much impact and have that ripple effect.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You've kind of already gone into this, Sheila, but did you have any unique challenges because you were a woman along your journey?
Absolutely. And I want to talk about that because I feel like people don't talk about it enough. Obviously, there's a lot of fear of repercussion right now. So, I speak to individuals and they're afraid to go to their HR departments and of course, like I understand that, and that makes me sad. And I think you also made a point, which I wanted to just double click on, was that people dropping out that are really brilliant and innovative, it's tragic. For me, I'm in the industry of developing innovative medicines for patients. If we're having really talented, innovative, brilliant chemists and scientists and clinicians dropping out because they're not supported, like patients are going to be suffering because of that. And that is tragic. I almost dropped out, and I know I'm a really great drug developer. So, that does really make me sad, to understand like that ultimately could be that impact of people opting out. So, I think again, like that believing in yourself and, when people do say things that, they don't mean to be hurtful many times, there's a lot of unconscious bias. So kind of giving people the benefit of the doubt and having compassion for them in addition to yourself, because they're probably going through something hard or maybe operating from a place of fear for them. So I talk about that in my book too, like, giving people space and having compassion for them if they're not even treating you well, to try to understand that, but not tolerating it still, not tolerating it or saying it's acceptable, because it isn't. It's not acceptable for you. It's not acceptable for your children. It's not acceptable for your loved ones. And so, just always keep that in mind. If you're kind of questioning whether something is okay in terms of what someone said to you or did to you, think about your loved one and would you be okay with that happening to that person? And if you're not, then it's not okay for you. Doing those types of exercises, because sometimes we just, again, accept all these things and normalize, what things should not be normalized. So yeah, I absolutely faced a lot of this firsthand. And, I want to let people know that so that they know, again, that they're not alone if they're facing these things, and also that it's not okay.
Yeah. I like the way you put that. I have a 19-year-old and a 21-year-old daughter. And a lot of times I will think, well, would I want someone to say this or do this to, my girls? And if it's not okay, it's not okay. So
it's very clarifying, right? It's a very clarifying exercise. And I have a lot of girl dads that reach out to me, and I love girl dads, and they're amazing. And just going through the exercise has given them a lot of clarity and has raised some of that kind of unconscious thinking and biases to their level of awareness, which is really helpful. So again, these messages are meant to be very inclusive so that we can all address it together, because it's going to take some time. We still know, less than 10% of Fortune 500 companies are run by women, and, there's single digit, percentage of women board chairs, and the women board directors are going down. Like, these things are very real. The data is there to show that. So we just need to do better. And, we need to figure this out together. No one is going to do this in isolation.
Yeah, I agree with you. I love the girl dads, the male allies, those that are like standing up and saying, yeah, I want my daughter, my wife, my sister, my aunt, I want them to have these opportunities. So they're in it. They're pushing.
They are. And yeah, we're all, we can all stand together, shoulder to shoulder to confront these things together and try to make a difference, not try, but make a difference. And I think we are doing this. I'm involved in this biotech CEO sisterhood effort in my industry, and it's really been super powerful. And anyone can check us out and see kind of the impact we're making, even at large investor healthcare conferences like JP Morgan's main conference every year that happens in San Francisco. We have Pink on the Square and hundreds of women and men showing up, standing together, saying that we want diversity in our industry, and we're going to celebrate that.
Mm-hmm. Sheila, what is the thing you are most proud of?
Well, I'm proud of three big things in my life right now. The first, of course, are my children. I think first and foremost, I am a mother. That's a huge part of me now, and I'm so grateful to have that experience. It's something that you just treasure so much, and so I'm very proud that I have two wonderful children, a son and a daughter, who are very good people, and I think are going to be contributors in society and life, and I'm just so proud of them. I'm very proud of the drugs that I have gotten approved and helped to get approved in my journey. I have drugs that are being used to treat patients with multiple sclerosis, rheumatoid arthritis, lupus, inflammatory bowel disease, cancer, all different types of cancer. I just feel so proud when I hear about someone, that is on a drug that I worked on and helped to lead. It's just so meaningful. And then the third thing I'm most proud about right now is all the advocacy work I've been doing to help women and people from underrepresented backgrounds, find their voice and feel safe and supported and heard, and give them some tools and resources, either through the social media platforms I've been building, my newsletter, my book, The Mirror Effect, my TEDx talk, and then these groups I've been supporting. I've now been involved with starting the Biotech CEO Sisterhood and co-founding that with two other amazing women. And we are a nonprofit at this point. So we are just getting organized and taking off. And it's been, I know, really helpful and transformative for women and men in our industry. And I'm doing the same for a South Asian Biopharma Alliance and leader group in our industry. So I'm really proud of the advocacy work that I think is really going to be helping the next generations.
Yeah, I love that. And the idea of pay it forward, as we mentioned earlier, just so important and so impactful. I do think that once you get good at doing what you're doing, teaching the next generation or helping someone to rise with you, like we call it, I'm in a women's organization in financial services, and we call it Bring a Woman With You. So I love that.
I love that too. That's beautiful. Yeah, lift each other up while we're climbing and bring them along with you. And let's leave the world a better place as much as we can, whatever's in our power. And everything that I find really, really fulfilling is just, it goes beyond me. And I think that's just a kind of a recipe for joy for me.
Any advice for a young lady who's kind of just starting down the path that you're so successful at to help her get where you're at to be successful like you?
Well, first and foremost, believe in yourself. Get clear on what you want to do, what your goals and dreams and aspirations are, and don't give up on that. You're going to have great days and not so great days, but believe in yourself and, keep trying and figuring out how to achieve what you want in your life. And if that's being a teacher or a professional or, a speaker or a writer, don't give up on yourself like that. You can absolutely do these things. So believe in yourself. And then the second is find your people. Find your people that are going to support you because you don't need to do it alone. I thought I had to do everything alone. You don't. People are there. They want to help you. Find your cheerleaders and your mentors and your sponsors. The sponsors are the people who really open up those doors for you. Find people who are going to help you, help train you and, grow you as a leader or whatever area you're trying to get great at, your subject matter experts, your peers, just load up that board of directors with lots of different people who really see you and rely on them and lean on them and help them as much as you can too. And you're going to have a very fulfilling, meaningful life if you do those things.
I love that. Sheila, thank you so much for spending this time chatting with us and just sharing all your experience and your wisdom. If I have a young lady who wants to reach out and ask questions or pick your brain just a little bit, how does she get in touch with you?
Well, I have a presence on LinkedIn, Instagram, and Facebook. So, feel free to reach out to any three. Probably my biggest is on LinkedIn. You can also DM me. And then also I have a newsletter and I have a website, SheilaGujrathiMD.com. And I have my newsletter, so please sign up for my newsletter. I'll send it out every month on a topic. So I try to help as many people as I can through those lessons learned and the writings that I have. And then, of course, buying my book and, anything else that, that I'm putting out there into the world. I hope that you find that helpful.
Well, thank you. I have found it helpful. I found it really inspiring and uplifting. So thank you so much for spending this time with us.
Well, it's been such a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.